recording. Okay, it's all yours.
All right. So you guys can see it, right? Oop.
Yep,
Well,
I can see it.
all right. Hold on. Let me get situated. What if I do that? Can you still see it?
Your notes? No. Look
No,
at the.
the slideshow.
It's in slideshow. Yes, for us.
Okay. All right. So I have a few slides here. There's 22 slides, so bear with me. But thanks again for having me tonight. This is going to be fun. So move that up a little bit. So as you can see, I'm going to be talking to you all tonight about straws, the unusual history of the straw, which surprisingly enough stands for suction tube for reverse axial withdrawal. I don't know if anybody knew that. So I thought I'd put that on there. That's me. My contact information if you need it. If you want it again, it'll be at the end. So in the beginning, let me know if you can't see something or if my screen goes funky, okay?
Okay, looks great.
Okay. So in order to fully grasp, get it, grasp
Yeah.
the unusual history of the straw, we need to go back in time before Friedman patented the drinking tube or the bendy straw, before a man named Marvin Stone discovered how to make straws not disintegrate in mint juleps. We have to go all the way back to 3000 BC, underground, as a matter of fact, into the tomb of Puabi, a Sumerian queen of Ur, which is modern-day Iraq. That's where the men who built her tomb placed within it two items that start our journey into the history of the straw. The first item was a seal that showed two men drinking beer from a jar using long tubes, which you can see here. And the second was a solid gold straw. Excavations on the city of Ur in Mesopotamia were done by the archaeologist Charles Leonard Woolley and his team. Finding and uncovering Queen Puabi's tomb and the oldest straw were just two of the many objects they found and documented. Woolley and his team were there from 1922 until 1932, which is just after he was working on another famous site, Amarna, from 1921 to 1922. Royalty, like Queen Puabi, used fancy straws, and this gold one, was definitely fancy. Not only was it more than 3 feet long, but it was solid gold. In the cemetery nearby, they also found many other gold or copper straws, but they were much shorter. The longest that has ever been found was over 4 feet. Straws like these were more than likely used to drink beer. Now, this is where I kind of went down the rabbit hole and went and kind of combined our straw talk with my ancient beer talk. So you may be thinking, why would you use a straw to drink beer? Was it kind of like one of those wine, you know how people nowadays kind of drink wine with a straw, which I personally think is crazy, but I get it, I guess. But we have to remember here that beer originally was a fermented drink that had the consistency of a watery oatmeal. The part of the beer you wanted was at the bottom, and the thick bits floated to the top, and so you needed something to get down to the good stuff. For the poorer people of Ur who wanted to partake in this beer, they used the original straw, which were long, hollow reeds, sometimes wrapped with precious metals or precious materials. Not as fancy, but they got the job done. Evidence shows that these reeds were used in communal jars as a way of bonding with others. And you can kind of see a diagram on the slide where the pot would be in the center and everybody sits around it and drinks from the same pot through these long straws. And it's kind of like talking around the water cooler kind of a situation. Eventually, the straw even made it to Egypt in small numbers, but they put a bit of a spin on it. They using perforated metal tips on the end of the reeds, and which acted like a strainer to kind of get through the gunk that was on the top and not, drink it through the straw. And a small number of these were found at some archaeological sites dating to the 18th dynasty, but for the life of me, I could not find any pictures of them. So I want to just take a look at ancient beer because this is actually a really cool thing. And it coincides with straws in a really nice way at the end. So ancient beer is not only associated with ritual health, spiritual offerings, and a form of payment. Evidence found also suggests a knowledge of the resources our ancestors had around them. In 2018, archaeologists found what appears to be the oldest evidence of beer production in Raqefet Cave in Israel. There they found 3 13,000-year-old stone mortars that had residue on them of wheat or barley starches that appeared to be malted, mashed, and fermented, everything necessary to brew beer. So in the diagram here in the picture, you can see there's the cave, Raqefet, and inside that cave and kind of also on the outside of it, they found these pits that were dug into the bedrock. And these at the very top here is what they use to preserve and crush the grains and everything for brewing the beer. And on letter C, you can see like a diagram of how they would actually use the two on the top in B. So it's kind of a neat way, a neat visual. Ancient breweries were surprisingly common from Egypt to China. In 2016, beer making toolkits dating to 3400 to 2900 BC were found in Shanghai, China. Now, I butcher foreign names, so forgive me, but this is a Chinese name. I think it's Zhizhang Wang. It's Jiajing Wang. He's at the University of Stanford. He and his team found funnels, pots, and everything needed for filtration while excavating in underground rooms. And here on the slide, you can see examples of what they found in this beer making toolkit. So A gives you this illustration of like a cross-section view of the pit where they found everything. B is the funnel, which is on the left. That went into the top of D, which was a pot. And C was also the top of a pot. And I think that says E. That is like a stove fragment where they used to cook everything. And they've done these really remarkable reconstructions of kind of like a puzzle piece of what they found. It's pretty cool. So there's a man, a collector out of the United States, and his name is Tom Lee. He's a collector of ancient documents, and he has in his collection this clay tablet that's dated to 2050 BC from the city of Ur. And a recent translation highlights beer in the Mesopotamian region. This tablet in cuneiform, it says, Ur-Amma acknowledges receiving from his brewer Alulu 5 sila, which is about 4.5 liters of the best beer. Basically, this breaks down to mean that Ur-Amma bought some beer from Alulu. This is possibly the oldest beer receipt, and it was important enough to document it for the ages because, as Ur-Amma has on the receipt, it is the best beer. In fact, beer was so important to the people in and around the Fertile Crescent that it is mentioned in the Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh, the earliest form of literature written in 2100 BC on 12 tablets. Tablet 2, which you can see a fragment of on this slide, mentions a harlot giving beer to a man named Enkidu. It says, quote, "The harlot spoke to Enkidu, saying, 'Eat the food, Enkidu, it is the way one lives. Drink the beer, as is a custom of the land.' Enkidu ate the food until he was sated. He drank the beer, 7 jugs, and became expansive and sang with joy," end quote.
Does that mean he was drunk?
Yeah. he became, I take it to mean he became expansive, like he got really full
Loud.
and loud, sang with joy. The Code of Hammurabi, I can never say anything right. 282 laws carved into a diorite stela set up in Babylon's Temple of Marduk, the national god of Babylonia. It dates to 1754 BC, and the picture you're looking at is almost its entirety. This represents the earliest laws or codes ever written, and one of my favorites with regard to beer is number 108. Quote, if a tavern keeper, a feminine tavern keeper, does not accept corn according to gross weight in payment of drink, but takes money, and the price of the drink is less than that of the corn, she shall be convicted and thrown into the water, end quote. Kind of harsh. A more famous one that you may have heard of is number 196, although it doesn't have anything to do with beer. I thought it was pretty cool. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eyes shall be put out. What we refer to now as an eye for an eye. Also harsh, but back in those days, things were a little more harsh. So looking at archaeological evidence, emmer, a type of wheat, was used in making the first breads as well as the first beer. The earliest evidence for this is from a site in northern Iraq and the region that makes up the Fertile Crescent called Tepe Gawra. With seals dating to 4000 BC featuring the drinking of beer using straws, we can see the role that beer played in this ancient culture. The bread, through a series of processes, was eventually mashed, soaked, and left to ferment. This early concoction used berries, dates, and honey to kickstart the fermentation process, but also probably used them for taste and higher alcohol content. Later, backslapping was used to start fermentation. Backslapping doesn't sound very appealing, and the fact that it basically means using some of the old brew to make the new brew makes it sound even less appealing, but it worked. Eventually, different kinds of grains like barley and millet were used, as well as yeast for the fermentation process. And you can see on the slide that on the left, there's a drawing of a seal impression that was found on a lump of clay in Tepe Gawra. And it has the two figures drinking out of the long straws in the large jugs. And they just assumed that it was beer that they were drinking because of all of the kind of brewery type things and bread residue that they found nearby. And on the right, this is just something they found in one of the tombs during what is Emile Chassenat's one of his excavations. He's the director of the French Institute for Oriental Archaeology in Kairos in the late 1800s. And when that excavation was complete, he had found several of the seals that you see on the left, and this little kind of model of people making bread and beer. Ancient Egyptian beer also utilized emmer, which was discovered in the brewery excavations of Amarna. This particular city site gives us so much information on daily life because it was abandoned just after the death of the pharaoh Akhenaten. Amarna was first excavated in 1921 and 1922 by a team led by Woolley and supported by the Egyptian Exploration Society. One of the places they partially uncovered was the workmen's village, Deir el-Medine, which you can see in the slide. But they didn't quite discover the brewery. That was left to Barry Kemp, director of the Amarna project from 1977. Working at Cambridge University, he was approached by the same Egyptian Exploration Society as Woolley, and his ongoing work became known as the Amarna Project. He continued these early excavations led by Woolley and greatly expanded them, one of which was the discovery of what seemed to be a bakery and a brewery. Grains of emmer were found mixed in with bread bits inside broken brewing jars, which are estimated to have held about 50 liters of beer. Basically, the people making the bread were also making beer using the same raw material of emmer. Some of the earliest beer wouldn't have been filtered like we know it now. Beer would have had things floating in it, like I said earlier. I know that sounds gross, but let me explain. Beer wasn't originally like the beer we have today. It was more like what I said before, like an oatmeal type substance. You would kind of eat it. And that kind of a drink actually happens a lot in, it can be found a lot in like Indian cultures and the Middle Eastern cultures. And even today they make things that they put kind of the short grain pastas in along with the drink, and they eat it. So it's very interesting. But the ancient Sumerians used to preserve the grain by baking it. And when that got wet, it fermented into a very strong liquid beer. Then they added honey and spices and left pieces of bread in it. Then they would drink the thick beer through a very long straw. They wanted to get to the liquid at the bottom and avoid the bits floating on top. Now, I tried to find a picture of that, but they don't have any that I can find. And I actually tried to make it. I found a recipe. By the way, it's disgusting. And I couldn't get a good picture of it with all the stuff floating in it. It was pretty nasty. I don't know how they used to drink it. If I did the recipe correctly, it was awful. So if you find it on the internet, don't make it. The way that they were drinking this beer with the bits floating on top, it proved to actually be beneficial for the health of some of the ancient people, especially in the lands surrounding Egypt. Slaves, for example, the ones who built the pyramids of Egypt, were often paid in beer for their work, which amounted to a daily ration of a little over 10 pints. Archaeologist Jeremy Geller of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign found one of the oldest breweries in Egypt in the city of Hierakonpolis, dating to circa 3400 BC. He and his team believed that this particular brewery could produce 300 gallons per day, which is possibly associated with the large-scale building the higher-ups were having the slaves do. Ironically enough, those slaves were often healthier than their captors because there was a natural antibiotic in the beer from the bacteria and yeast in the fermentation process. On the slide, you can see some, oh, sorry if you can hear my dog. She wanted to get her 2 cents in. The city of Hierakonpolis, this is part of what they found, part of the brewery that they found, and then inside of some of the large broken jugs, the vats, they took a picture of it and they scraped up some of the bits and analyzed it to see what kind of residue it was. Apologies for my dog. Okay, this is kind of neat looking, like a little alien cross section. But the earliest antibiotic that we know about, which is tetracycline, was found in the bones of ancient Nubians 2,000 years ago and in ancient Egyptians over 8,000 years ago. Researchers from Emory University and Paratech Pharmaceuticals found traces of tetracycline in human bones from Nubia and from Egyptian bones, and discovered the source to be from the beer they were drinking daily. Specifically from here's another word, streptomyces. It's a type of soil bacteria that's found in the grain they use to ferment the beer. By consuming this early antibiotic, they were, without even knowing it, boosting their immune systems. And this is a cross-section, a rib cross-section of the tetracycline that was found in the Nubian bones. So let's move on to, we're making a big jump now. We're going to the 1500s because with the history of the straw, nothing really changed until this time period. In South America, in the early 1500s, the Tupi and Guarani tribes used a similar device for a drink called the yerba mate, which we still have today. Yerba mate is a tea prized for its energy-boosting leaves and its medicinal values. It was the same idea as drinking beer with a straw, but in the yerba mate, it was leaves you had to get past, not oats and barley. They used clay pots like the one that you see on the slide, although it wasn't just clay pots. Now they used gourds and things like that as well. But they used the pots to contain the drink and the hollow twigs or the reed bulbs as their straw, which they called a bombilla. The traditional bombillas had a spoon-like shape at the bottom enclosing the tube, which you can see in the slide, and this is how it is today. And the holes that are on there acted as a strainer. The tea and its stimulant-producing leaves quickly became the drink of choice for South American tribes, as well as the men and women who colonized the area in the 17th century. However, its ritualistic tribal use, among other things, caused the drink to be labeled as evil. And in 1616, it was banned on threat of excommunication. Today, if you want to try this demonic drink, you can without fear of being kicked out of your church, but the straw used is now made of metal and in a variety of shapes. There's actually, you can get it over here in California, you can get a traditional yerba mate with this bombilla in one coffee house, and you have to drive an hour and a half to get to it, but it's the only one in Southern California that you can get a traditional one. It's kind of cool. I went to it. It's really good. I was surprised. Okay. Making another jump in time here. The modern straw began not as gold or reed, but as ryegrass. In the 1870s, a man named Marvin Stone, who was living in Washington, D.C., invented a machine that made paper cigarette holders. He was doing well for himself and his family, but was always looking for his next great invention. This came in 1888, while he and some friends were drinking mint juleps using the typical straw of the time, ryegrass. Ryegrass had been used for decades as straws, and although it was a common thing to drink out of at the time, it was also frustrating, as you can imagine. Ryegrass cracked easily, it left an odor in the drink, and worst of all, it disintegrated into the liquid. Stone found this very irritating, especially since it messed with the flavors of his favorite drink. So he decided to come up with a better material for the straw. He took some paper, wrapped it around a pencil, put the glue on the paper, waited for it to dry, and then took the pencil out, and voila, the perfect straw. Well, not quite. Very close, though. Although many people loved his invention because it didn't crack and had no odor, it still became soggy and broke down in the drinks, leaving bits of paper to chew on. Then Stone had a brilliant idea: paraffin wax. He did the same thing as before, but instead of using plain paper, he used manila paper coated in paraffin. That was it. He patented it as paper julep straws that same year, and by 1890, his cigarette holder factory was producing more straws than cigarette holders. And on the left, you can see his original patent, and on the right is one of the first advertisements on the patent paper julep straws. Okay, so now I'm going to do something that is probably a bit odd for a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to tell you a story. This is a true story, and one that I wrote for a book that I did with Karen on unusual history. And it's based on the man you see in the slide, Joseph B. Friedman, and how he first came up with the bendy straw. And you can see his original notes on the left and his patent on the right for the bendy straw. So I'm just going to read you this quick little story that I wrote about him, because I think it really illustrates how cool him and coming up with this idea was. It was an unusually hot San Francisco day in 1937. The sun glistening off the freshly painted Golden Gate Bridge, not a cloud in sight. Vendors were in full swing on most of the city streets, carts full of the day's fruits and vegetables, flowers, and everything else you can imagine, ready for tourists and locals alike. Down on 19th Avenue, Joseph Friedman was walking with his daughter Judith to his brother Albert's ice cream parlor. He had promised her that if she was quiet in the morning so he could get some work done, that he would take her for some ice cream, and she did not let him forget. So off they went midday to the Varsity Sweet Shop on the corner of 19th Avenue and California Street. He needed a break anyway. Most days he was a realtor, but Friedman's true passion was for inventing things. From a lighted pencil to engine improvements, it didn't matter. He just loved it. Judith's pigtails were bouncing wildly as she skipped in front of her father, excited to have a cold treat. When they arrived, she squealed and ran into the store to see her uncle. When Friedman walked in, she was already seated at the counter and talking to Albert. He said hello to his brother and then watched as he prepared the largest milkshake they had ever seen, chocolate with whipped cream, rainbow sprinkles, chopped nuts, and cherries on top. 2 extra just for Judith. Judith's eyes were wide when Albert put it down in front of her. Friedman smiled too and began chatting with his brother over the week's events. After a short while, he looked at his daughter and saw her on her knees, struggling to drink the milkshake from the paper straw sticking straight up out of the tall glass. Suddenly, Friedman couldn't hear anything around him. Not his brother talking about something he read in the paper, nor the chatter from the family seated around him. All he could hear were his thoughts wildly drawing up schematics for a new type of straw. That's how his mind worked. When he saw the potential for a new invention, his mind began drawing it out a million different ways until he loved one of them. While his brother was still talking and Judith was still trying to drink, he reached over to her milkshake, pulled out the straw, and stared at it. Chocolate ice cream dripped in slow motion down his arm and onto the counter. Judith was protesting, Albert was trying to wipe the mess up, and Friedman, he was smiling. He told Albert to watch Judith, that he had an idea and that he would be right back. And with that, Friedman ran out of the ice cream parlor and didn't stop until he reached his house. Breathless, he flung open the door to his workshop and put the straw down on the table. He looked around for a moment, then retrieved some dental floss from the bathroom and a screw from his workbench. Placing the screw inside the straw, he took the dental floss and wrapped it tightly around the straw, right where the screw threads were, which caused the paper of the straw to indent. Would it work, he thought? Slowly and carefully, so as not to rip the paper straw, he removed the dental floss and took out the screw, then bent the straw where the corrugations were. And then he smiled. It took him less than 5 minutes to run back to the ice cream parlor. Sweating profusely and out of breath, he burst into the sweet shop like a crazy person, flew to the counter, and held up the straw to his brother. "I did it," he shouted. Everyone in the shop stopped talking and looked at him. Friedman stuck the straw into Judith's milkshake, the top bending over the edge of the glass, allowing her to drink effortlessly. She looked up happily at her father. Joseph B. Friedman had just invented the bendy straw. One of my favorite invention stories, because there's actually notes that he wrote on how he thought this up and pictures of his daughter. It's like one of the cutest stories that I have found in my research. But from 1937, we moved to 1939. In 1939, 2 years after he solved his little daughter's milkshake problem, Friedman created the Flex Straw Company. This unique straw didn't just become a favorite with kids and their milkshakes. Over the next few years, the design made its way into hospitals. At the time, hospitals were using glass tubes as drinking straws for their patients. Although they could be reused, which saved the hospital money, they often broke and needed to be washed constantly. But the biggest problem of all, patients who couldn't sit up had a heck of a time drinking out of them. Friedman began marketing them to nurses who quickly saw the benefits of the bendy straw and were hooked. From then on, no more glass drinking tubes. Paper straws and straws coated with wax ruled the drinking world until the 1960s. It was then that plastic became the one and only straw material of choice, making way for one of Karen's favorite innovations, the crazy straw. And I think almost everybody had one or two of these as a kid. I know I did. I had the ones in the center right here. Those were the ones I had, pink, of course. Offering a level of durability that would have probably put a smile on the face of earlier innovators Stone and Friedman, these plastic straws also allowed for interesting shapes that can often look like a straw roller coaster and even make your name if you wanted it. I saw a picture of this little girl, and her name, I think it said Carmen or something, and it was written out in cursive in the straw. Nowadays, the straw has to take in a unique retro turn. Plastic straws can be very durable, and that is the biggest problem. They can last in landfills long after you've finished your drink. Now, innovators are looking back at the straws of old, paper, metal, and even rye, to find the next craze in the way we drink. Yes, the straw has gone through many variations: straight, bendy, crazy, made of gold, reed, rye, metal, wood, plastic. And you know, I love them all, but I think I may have to give the gold medal to McDonald's. Now, I know what you're thinking, but let me explain. McDonald's, they put out its infamous Shamrock Shake every March for St. Patrick's Day, which, if you've never tried it, you have to. It is 6 or 7 layers of mint, chocolate, and vanilla goodness mixed with love and God knows what else, because it's very addicting. You can see a picture of it on the screen here. It has all these amazing layers. Because the shake is thicker than normal, and because there are so many different layers, each with their own flavor, a normal straw does not work in this shake. It doesn't give the drinker each layer at the same time, which means the person doesn't really taste how amazing the shake is. So in 2017, McDonald's made 1,000 special straws that allowed all the flavors in your mouth at the same time with one sip. Now, I looked everywhere on the internet for one of these straws, even calling, I even called McDonald's headquarters to see if they had any left or if they were planning on releasing any more, and no one had any, which surprises me because they still put out the Shamrock Shake every March. But I didn't know what that straw looked like, and so I made one, and now I use it whenever, like, I don't usually drink milkshakes, but every March I get one Shamrock Shake, and I keep the straw because they don't make it anymore, and it really is the best way to do it. So the straw McDonald's made was basically an upside down bendy straw with more of a J shape, like you see in the picture. The key is there are 5 holes instead of the normal 2. There's a hole right at the bendy part, which you can't see in the picture, but it's right here where the arrow is. 2 of different sizes near the end of the J, which are here and here. And of course, there's a hole at each end of the straw, on the top and the bottom. The idea is that when you push the J-shaped portion of the straw into the drink and take a sip, you'll be able to get at least 3 layers into your mouth at the same time. And I guarantee you that it works, and there's a difference. And there's actually, if you're bored enough one day, you can go on YouTube or ask me for the link. Karen and I made a video of us trying the straw that I made with a regular straw in the Shamrock Shake. We went to McDonald's and we got 2 Shamrock Shakes, and she tried and I tried, and you can really taste a difference. It makes a big difference. It's a very important straw in our history. So anyway, there you have it. That's the last straw. I know, I'm so funny. The crazy inventions that keep making us fall in love with something as common as a drinking tube. Oh, by the way, January 3rd is National Drinking Straw Day. So, you know, that's coming up. So if you want to like try different straws or try to make this J-shaped straw, that would be a good time to start. And even start inventing. You never know, maybe next time we'll all be talking about you and your version of the suction tube for reverse axial withdrawal. Thank you. There's my contact info. And just in case, there's our Weird History podcast. You can find it on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, like wherever you listen to podcasts, you can just search the title and it'll come up. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, when did they start the
Yeah, can you do it again?
Can I do it again? Sure.
I'm just kidding. I missed it. I'm sorry.
Who's that, Ruth?
Hey Ruth, I recorded it. So
Yes, this is Ruth. Yeah.
So
Oh, thank you.
So you
And
can
also I can read it here in the third.
Yeah. Yeah, my question was, so when did they start this national annual straw day?
Oh my gosh, you know what? That is a really good question. I don't know. Karen is on the line though. I see a picture of her face. Karen, if you're listening, do you remember when we were doing our research when they started National Straw Day? Uh-oh.
You
Maybe
caught
she's
I
her
have
not paying.
no idea.
Oh,
I
Karen's-
don't remember. I'm here. I'm driving to Oceanside right now, so you might hear like clickers and stuff, but I have no idea. I feel like it's 2000
I'm gonna
something.
Google it.
Yeah, Google it. I think it's 2000 something. It was definitely post 90.
Okay. Oh, guess what? Wait. That can't be right. 1888. No. When did they do it? National Straw Day.
Maybe 1888 is National like hay straw day.
They don't, I don't actually see anywhere where it says when they started that. That's a good question, though. National Drinking Straw Day. It's the same, they just keep telling me it's the same time every year, but it has to be for a while. It has to be for a while now because at least, I would say at least from the 80s, because some of the stuff that I was reading about went back that far about National Straw Drinking Day. So it has to be at least from the 1980s. It sounds like a 1980s thing to make up.
See, I was thinking post 1990s, but I don't know, 80s. Yeah, they had a lot of there was a lot of inventions and innovations of straws in the 80s, like with all the bendy straw, or not bendy straws, the really
Crazy
cool,
straw.
like crazy straws. Yeah, there was a lot of that going on. I remember it was like a resurgence. So
Karen, did you
why
hear?
not?
Karen, did you hear the part where I was talking about the crazy straw and how is your favorite?
I did hear that. Thank you. I need to have one with my name in it though. That would be the ultimate. You know, one that says
Yes.
lazy. That would be great.
I'll find you one.
Okay.
So, guys and gals on the phone, anybody have any more questions?
Well, I appreciate you all listening to my little talk and my putting up with my dog barking and the slides and everything like that. It was a lot of fun. I hope it was entertaining for you all. And Karen and I did a lot of research on this topic, and it was a lot of fun to kind of put together. And if you have questions like that you remember later or anything that you want to add to it, feel free to contact me. Clint has my contact info if you didn't grab it, and email, call anytime.
Okay, well, we appreciate your efforts. Takes a lot of work to put a presentation together and then, of course, give it. We normally give our presenters something, so if you could send your home address to us or wherever you want it to go, just tell us. And
Is it
what
a shamrock shake?
Yeah,
Is it chocolate?
chocolate. Yeah, so
I'd be
yes,
happy with any kind of chocolate.
yeah. To be honest, I'm off the subject, but I think the best chocolate in the world is from Kansas City.
Really?
It's called Christopher Elbow, and I know in California you have C's, but this is way out there. It's
Oh, I'm gonna have
incredibly
to try
good.
that. Karen, have you had that?
Never even heard of it until just this moment.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're
I
gonna have
did
to
make
find
it.
some.
I did make it up.
You didn't?
No, I didn't make it up. So
Well,
I
we'll have
believe
to find you some, Dad, and then maybe we can ship it out here something for Christmas.
yep. Okay, well, thanks for everybody's time. And
Thank you.
this is we didn't do a business meeting, so we knew you had to leave and go, take care of your kids. So that's okay.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, you guys can all stay on and do your business meeting, and I can leave. If you want, it's up to you.
I don't know if anybody wants to do the business meeting because we don't spend any money, so there's really not a treasurer's report, right? The only thing we would have to say is, has everybody got their dues up to date? we take our dues and utilize it to pay for Zoom. And our dues is, I think it's $12 a year. It's not exactly a lot of money.
Terrible.
So anyway, with that said, we'll
I'm just
see
gonna
you.
pay for,
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna pay for life. I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
gonna pay for life and then I won't have to worry
Oh
about
yeah,
it.
yeah. See, that's I'm I'm actually a life member because it's not that expensive, and I know there is
No.
another life member within our organization, Sandy Rogers. So there's 2 life members.
Oh, Sandy.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
So
There'll be
okay,
3 now.
there'll be 3. All right. Well, thanks for everybody coming. See you next time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
sorry I
you.
came
Merry
so
Christmas.
late.
Oh,
Merry
that's all right.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Okay,
All right.
Bye.
Mary, Mary. Bye.